So first we have Ryan Kirk. He's a professor at Elon University, kind of an old school geographer, GIS background with 17 years of experience. And he's focused on location services and the use of smartphones. His presentation is using smartphone applications for campus information.
All right. Told we have to use the microphones here, make sure that works. Thank you very much, everyone, to come into the session. Was invited to give a talk about how I use mobile computing in our geography and GIS curriculum at Elon. So really what this talk is about is a series of case studies that I've used in multiple classes over a few years time period. I think these examples would be applicable in any sort of education setting. I think these could definitely work their way down in the K-12 system. If any of you are involved in things like GIS Day events, public outreach, the tools that I'm going to talk about are almost all freely downloadable apps, so completely separated from some sort of the Esri world or so forth. So just a little background of what inspired me to this. Back in the late 90s, I remember reading some wonderful papers about groups that would give people GPS units and send them out and document where they go in their communities, and then really started to get some evidence of how different sub-communities within larger communities use our spaces in quite different ways, really striking eye-openers. And I always had in the back of my mind that I'd love to do that with college students or as a research project, but just the logistics of getting GPS and having people record their points is just messy. Suddenly the smartphone revolution really changed all this, especially with all the location service apps that are out now. So just make sure we're all on the same page. So location service just means any service that uses the location of the recipient to modify the information provided to that recipient. So your weather app when it says your local location. I feel like in this crowd we all know this already, but just want to be clear. Particularly in the teaching world, there's been a couple of studies on this of how do we actually use these technologies. Some of them are just understanding location services as a topic. So study the process of how we actually implement location services, use that information. How do we apply that in terms of business analytics or social analytics, whatever the case may be? My interest is this bottom one, location services as a pedagogical tool to help students understand other concepts more clearly. So to me, this is situated learning, where you're out in the field doing this type of learning, collecting data as you go. But then to have your phone be your primary data collection tool, I think is quite valuable. All right. Benefits of using smartphones in this type of situation. It's simple. There's so many apps that you can download instantly at the start of a session. Ubiquitous technology. At our university, every student I know has a phone. Getting down into the K-12 level, I'm working with a middle school group where probably 60% of the students have phones. The school has iPods available for students that don't have their own personal phones. So we're working on that. And then, everyone lives with their phones nowadays, so if you can bring their daily routines into the process, I think everyone kind of finds that interesting. All right, so 4 examples going to cover here. The first one is just a geographic theory concept, this idea of regionalization. How do we divide the world up into regions, and how does that help us understand our world? Common topic in any world regional geography course. I teach this concept most heavily in my Geography of North America course. First day of class exercise, I give the students paper maps of just the lower 48 states and say, identify the regions of the United States. This is a very eye-opening exercise. Most Elon students are East Coast oriented, either North Carolina, a lot up in New England, the Northeast area. So some of them come up with what I would consider somewhat reasonable here. We could all debate some of these. Texas in the south, what is a desert region, and so forth. Other groups, if you can see this one, not nearly as clear. Clearly a lack of understanding on what the Midwest is. Although it's clear it's a nebulous boundary, obviously, but I think this one was exaggerated a bit more. And so I really want to get the students to start thinking more critically about this idea of regionalization. So at the start of the semester, I'm doing a formal study on this. I asked them after that exercise, write down what criteria they use to define regions of the United States. And then the green bars are the percentage of responses for each of these categories. Many of them use mountain ranges, things like that, stereotypes they know from TV, movies, things like that, some kind of perceived cultural differences, personal experiences, all the way down where some of the students were thinking about animals and biogeography. So a pretty good start, but wanted to go a little bit deeper in this idea. So the assignment I had them to do was to create a regionalization of just our local community. So Elon is right next to Burlington. We're about a half hour east of Greensboro. So after they did that exercise, the students had to go out and really absorb our community. Put them in groups, had them create anonymous Twitter accounts. They used our hashtag ElonGeo. So I sat in my office while they're out there in their groups traveling around, looking for visible markers of differences in regions in our particular area. I mean, our commercial districts, different type of residential neighborhoods, and then sort of see it in action. Brought that back into the classroom. It's not a GIS class, and so I wanted to give them some exposure to GIS. Simply Map is a site that our university has a license for, where you can go and look at a bunch of the census and demographic variables and create some maps right online. So their own personal visual experiences connected with some sort of analysis of the regions, and then think more critically about the regionalization concept and process as we go. Here's one example of what one of the groups came up with. Their final output, I just had them do polygons in Google Maps, so things that quite intuitively to figure out this data. And then they made a presentation for what criteria they used and how the regionalization concepts worked. I assessed this in a number of ways, got some quantitative data. Their test scores were better on questions related to regionalization. They're more sophisticated in their understanding of the concepts and positive feedback that they really enjoyed thinking critically about their communities. So that's one. Regionalization is a theory concept. Second example, urban design and place identification. So this is how do we use our local communities individually? Where do we go? What places do we identify with? How does that inform sort of our social interactions and our social divisions in our communities? So I worked with a computing science professor who teaches a mobile computing class, and his class created an app for me. We called it Map My Week. A simple concept of it's going to use your GPS, but low battery intensive. You set the intervals, so in this case every 20 minutes, going to kick on the GPS, collect a position fix, kick it right off. Store that information at the end of whatever the total time period is. This example is 21 days. It sends you an email with those coordinates of where you were every 20 minutes during that interval window. We have used this internally. The closest commercially available app that I've seen that does this kind of passive, low battery intensive location tracking is called Follow Me, which is the case you wanted to look that one up. So here's one example. We focused just on the campus community, filtered out if they ever went off campus. So here's a map of one particular student who got around a fair amount. So our main campus is sort of in the center there. See, football field is in the upper left, intramural field is in the lower right, tennis courts, academic buildings is right in the middle. Happy to see the students spend a lot of time in the library, recreation facilities in the gym, and then they can start to think about how do they use this space just with the hotspot analysis, just visual interpretation. Combining all students together in a class, we can have a nice discussion about our campus design. What are the core areas that we're using? What suggestions would students make for change? And then we're starting to tease this out a little more in some formal studies to look at things like introversion versus extroversion. Do we use campus differently? Different sorts of underrepresented groups at Elon. Do they have different patterns on campus? I'm working with a community psychologist on this one, and I feel like students have really enjoyed this example. All right, number 3, consumer behavior analysis. So this is one started in a GIS class, but I've broadened it beyond that, of mimicking sort of marketing analysis with students' actual experiences. And so have students use a couple different methods to actually collect where they do their consumer activity. Where do they eat? Where do they have their consumer purchases? Where do they do their entertainment? Some classes, I've assigned them anonymous Twitter accounts with the geolocated tweets, and so they send out for a period of time so we can look at patterns anonymously. I always give the option if students feel this is sort of invasion of privacy or something like that, or if they have any other concerns, can recreate it after the fact using Google Maps in that regard. So I've probably 150 students with different time slices of the year across a whole span of majors. Really start to see how Elon students are engaging our local community. The Elon campus, suburban up there, and then the upper left there, sort of Burlington, there's a Target and then stores if you've ever driven by, which is our commercial shopping district, and then our historic downtown area, which we're trying hard to redevelop, and quite clearly not tapping into the Elon student body to redevelop our Burlington downtown. Students can start doing some analysis of patterns of their own consumer behavior and comparing them as well. Another one I think they've enjoyed. All right, fourth and final example is this kind of idea of urban psychology, psychogeography. It's kind of a term that means a couple of different things, but to me it's just this question of how do design factors affect our psychological experiences. The clearest example is stress levels. And so this one, I did a semester abroad in London with a group of Elon students, and we did this one in the field in London. Found this study. BMW has helped fund this Guggenheim lab, and they did this study in several, New York City, I think it was Mumbai, and a couple of other cities around the world. And what we did was we went to specific locations, tracked where those locations were, recorded sort of our mood and stress levels, and then took a psychological test called a sustained attention to response test, where it flashes through a whole bunch of numbers quickly for like 2 minutes, and then you have to click on all of them except for a random number like 7. So you're sitting there watching this, and it's going really fast and trying to pause when a 7 is there. And imagine kind of doing this in a subway when people are walking by, and you can relate this to the stress levels. So here's just some examples. Gloucester Road Tube Station, we'd go stand right in the middle of the rush hour, see what your emotions are like at that point. Different types of commercial, residential areas, different types of facades, streetscapes. We would talk about all of these after they did that study, and then we ended up in a green space area to compare there. So just have a fair amount of data, but just some quick results here. We did word clouds of all their sort of emotional responses. So a commercial area versus a residential street. Just the busyness, some of the design, the darkness, the dirtiness kind of affected students in different sorts of ways. And we sort of replicated this study that in commercial areas, we can't focus as long. There's too many distractions. Kind of common sense, but to really put it into thought and then make the connection to design principles, I think has value. Another one I thought the students kind of enjoyed there. All right, so those are the 4 examples going through. Logistical considerations, I mean, it assumes smartphones are available. Maybe not the case with all groups. There is a cost if there's data use involved, which may be an issue. I send students out in cars, and who's paying for the gas type of thing, or is it a walking tour? That needs to be negotiated. There's always a risk of sending students out on their own. Elon is very supportive of this field-based learning, but I know in other situations you might have to have somebody, a sponsor or guide or so forth. And then sort of the back-end challenges of how do we use this, especially if they're not technologically savvy beyond their smartphones. How much can they handle in terms of the processing and the backload? Things like pulling down geolocated tweets and converting them into heat maps. I did all that with just Python scripting, and then would just give them the map in return. So there's some considerations along those lines. All right, privacy recommendations. This is a fuzzy line. I've asked students every single time, and they've all been quite willing to do this. Maybe it's a generational change, very open with this type of information. What I've always done, though, is created anonymous accounts, so they're doing this not linked to them individually. Sometimes I'll have a semi-anonymous where they have a code and I can at least confirm that they did this. I've always set a rule of I won't track them in real time. None of those Find My Friend apps or something like that where you can see where they are at any moment. I feel like that's a boundary I didn't want to cross. And then I've always tried to make alternatives available in case students somehow resist it in any particular way. But I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I feel like I've got good feedback on these types of things. Suggested apps for some of these, just some quick ones in case you want to do a community outreach. The simplest one I found for showing your actual latitude and longitude, available for iOS and Android, is the Where Am I At one. Twitter, of course, just have to turn on your location services. It's one of the options. It's not turned on by default, so you have to help the students turn that on so that when you send a tweet, it puts your latitude and longitude along with it. All right, on the back end, there are some free websites like these two that are up here where you can type in a Twitter account and it'll create the heat maps for you right on the website. So this could be one for GIS Day activity, something of that sort. But again, free, relatively easy to use. All right, that's what I have. Thank you all for coming to the session. Are there any questions at this time? We have time is the one thing we do have in this session. Yes, please. So one of the maps? This one. So a big limitation, which has been widely identified, is transportation access. Public transportation's very limited in Burlington, so that's hard. We're working on our bike plan right now, and it's not bike friendly at all to get between them. So students have to get there with cars. So that's one of the challenges. The second challenge is sort of the amenities students are looking for. A lot of the restaurants they like. There's a couple downtown, but there's a lot more of the ones they know out in our commercial shopping district. They're college kids, the better bars are on the west side of town. Yeah. So building that connection is difficult, but it is a goal. Yeah. Yes, please. Yeah. All right, so I just remembered they asked us to repeat the questions because the sessions are being recorded. The first question was specifically about the downtown access. This question is unique to Elon. We have our campus bus system are called bio buses. The university pays for buses that go out into the community. There is a bio bus that goes through downtown. It's primarily focused on internship and service learning, so it's only during daytime hours and pretty sporadic, just so we can get to our community partners so they can go work at the Boys and Girls Club, something of that sort. So it's not as easy for traditional use. Yeah. All right. Oh, one more, yes, please. All right, I'm going to use the pointer because I think we're supposed to be by the microphone. Target is here. Alamance Crossing Shopping District is here. And actually, the Walmart is here too. This is the Harris Teeter, and there's a mall and some restaurants. So I think that's the food source. And students are never shy. The ABC is listed on here multiple times, and I try to keep those boundaries clear, but yeah. All right. Well, that is it. Well, thank you all.